Okay, welcome to this session on storytelling. My name's DJ Clark. I'm a multimedia journalist and an educator based in Beijing. And today I have Brian Storm with me, the executive director of MediaStorm and founder of MediaStorm in Brooklyn, New York. Welcome, Brian. Thank you very much for coming and joining us for this session. Can we start just by maybe introducing MediaStorm to people who haven't come across it yet, and tell us a little bit how it has changed since its inception in 2005.
Yeah. Well, MediaStorm is a storytelling company. We, are founded largely on the principle that still photography is a super powerful way to communicate, but it also has limitations. And the big limitation that I've been trying to, chase for 20 years now is this idea of adding sound to still photography to essentially create films. So we originally started the company in 1994 when I was a grad student at University of Missouri. Then I left after only about 9 months to go to Microsoft, and I worked for MSNBC for 7 years, came out to New York to work for Corvus for a couple of years, and then brought the company back in 2005. So what are we, almost 8 years old now, I guess, and we've seen a lot of change. We've seen a lot of change since 1994, that's for sure. Largely in, I would say, two places. Not really in storytelling. I think storytelling is, it's as old as the hills. It hasn't changed that much. What I see the big change in is two places. One in the tools, and two in the distribution. And that has absolutely been revolutionized. The tools are, super high fidelity. You can get an HD camera now for a couple $1,000s, where it used to be $250,000 to get an HD camera. And the production tools, the software to produce films, the where Final Cut is, where Premiere is. I mean, it's just revolutionary as opposed to having to edit tape to tape. So I think the production tools have changed dramatically. And then, of course, with distribution, I mean, that to me is the real revolution that we're living through right now. This idea that anyone can start, a company or, produce a film on their own and put it out into the world. And there's no real gatekeepers now, 10 years ago, you couldn't put something on YouTube and get an audience, Sure. And I think if you have something to say, that there's an audience out there for it, and the tools to get it out there are there, particularly with social media. I mean, social media has been like the gasoline on our fire. The fact that someone can watch one of our films and, embed it on Facebook or, share it via Twitter, to their group of followers. I mean, that's a very revolutionary idea that is still pretty new, I think, and something that is helping us get the word out about the films that we're creating.
Great. And MediaStorm's kind of known for great storytelling. What do you think are the key elements to keep an audience engaged when you're putting together linear storytelling? In this particular session, we're dealing mainly with linear rather than interactive. So, how do you keep people watching in these days when it's so easy to sort of click away and find something else if you find what you're watching is not as interesting as maybe something else on the page?
I mean, what makes a great story is, something that has a good structure to it, a beginning, middle, and end, a surprise, it has a clear apex, it has a resolution. I mean, these are classic conventions. These are not revolutionary things. These are things that have been known for a long, long time. How you tell a good story isn't being invented in 2014. It's people have been doing it for hundreds of years. So that's where the whole interactive thing, to me, that is so new. That's so, there's no model. Like, everybody understands a play button and how a play button works, but when you have an interactive experience, it's you have to figure out the whole navigation structure is new, and I think that's a real challenging space and compared to linear. And I think linear is definitely the right move for still photographers to start with, because they already have big challenges they have to overcome. They're visually sophisticated already, and that's a real advantage. And I think that's one of the things that does help make a great story, having visual sophistication. If you think about it, most documentary films, they're really good audio track and kind of really bad visuals, And what we can bring to the table as an industry is a really sophisticated visual layer to what we're doing, but we have to get good at the narrative structure. How do you create a beginning, middle, and end? How do you create the surprise in a story? How do you have a payoff? So I'll give you an example, a film we did called Kingsleys Crossing. We did it in like 2006 or 2007, and we put it online, and it was a 21-minute film. So even today in 2014, if you said we're going to put a 21-minute film on the web, everyone would freak out. They'd say that's too long. You can't do, has to be 3 minutes, you know. Everyone thinks there's a 3-minute attention span on the web. Well, we have found that to be absolutely incorrect. If a film is powerful, if it's interesting, if it's engaging, people will stick with it. You know, in that case, Kingsley is 21 minutes. We have a 65% completion rate on that film. And the reason for that is because it is a great story. You just have to know, does Kingsley make it? You know, he's going from Limbe, Cameroon, to cross the desert, cross the ocean to get to Europe to make a better life for himself. And in that case, Olivier Jobard was the photographer. He spent, you know, 6 months covering this journey. You know, so I think one of the things that makes a great story is time. You know, time to report, time to do post-production well, and really trying to wring everything you have out of the material that's been gathered. But it's also like you fall in love with Kingsley. You're on the journey with him. You have to know, does he make it? And then once he gets there, there's this other thing that happens, and it's the storyline kind of continues to propel itself forward. You can't turn it off. You just want to know, does the guy make it? And then once he gets there, well, you're hooked, you know, like you're stuck. Like you're not going to leave that story at, you know, 17 minutes because you want to know what happens in the end, right? So I don't know that there's a recipe. There's a framework that I think people work with on storytelling, but, you know, every story is unique, and you have to sort of work with the material that's in front of you to try to make the most sense of it.
Sure. Yeah. And you've touched on this a little bit, but most of our audience are photojournalists. And in your experience, what do you think are the kind of key challenges for photojournalists who are moving away from the still image into linear storytelling, into basically working with video and stills on a timeline?
The fundamental thing that I've learned, you know, and I've been working on this model like since 1993, so it's been over 20 years now that I've been thinking about this fundamental idea, and it's sort of a bummer. What I've realized is the most important thing to the story is not the visuals, it's actually the audio. Like the audio is the key to the whole thing. So it would have been better if I had come, you know, from a radio background as opposed to a photography background. I think what makes our work unique is that the visuals are so powerful, and that we've learned how to, you know, do well with sound. You know, sound is like, you know, that's the spine of a film, and it's the key to making it really great. So that's really the first step that a still photographer has to take. They have to learn how to, you know, gather good sound. They have to learn how to conduct an interview, which is tough, man. I mean, most of us got into photography because we didn't want to write. You know, we love the visual part of storytelling. And what I found early in my career is that I didn't have to write if I asked a few good questions and just shut up and listen, that the subject would write the story for me. They were basically giving me captions on steroids, you know. The bottom line is, you know, if you have still photography and sound, you can make a film, right? So if that's basically what Kingsleys is, Kingsleys Crossing is, you know, we did a video interview with him, but we used his narrative to drive the story forward, and the photography becomes the visual layer. So that's where I would start. I would start not with video, I would start with recording sound, getting really good at audio, because that is the key to the whole process. And then once you move to video, like sound is the gateway drug to video. You know, it's the thing that allows you to, you know, get really good at the most important part of video. And then you move to video, and you're already a visual person, right? So you understand the language of visual storytelling. But video also has its own language. The big important element of that for us is what we call shooting for sequence. And, you know, it's the fundamental idea of walking into a scene and, you know, shooting a wide, a medium, a close-up, an extreme close-up, and trying to build a visual sequence that represents that scene, as opposed to just making a decisive picture, like this one moment that encapsulates everything. Video is more about creating, you know, a full picture of what's there. And it's a different language. It's a different way of thinking. So I think that's one of the great challenges. When a still photographer goes from just stills to video, all of a sudden they've got to deal with sound, which is a craft and an art in and of itself. And then they have to figure out, okay, how do I shoot for sequence, which is a different way of thinking than, you know, finding that one moment, making a frame, this explosive thing that comes together, and then you're done. Well, video doesn't work that way.
Over the years, you've talked quite a lot about monetizing. That the incentive for a lot of photographers should be that there is money, there's potential money, and for people coming, photographers in particular coming from the developing world, you know, this is a really key point. What is the financial incentive? How do you feel about that now? Because I've not sort of spoken to you about this for some years now, and I know that market is changing quite a lot. What is your kind of insight into the economics of a still photographer investing in some extra gear and trying to get into this time-based media as well as doing the stills?
Yeah. Well, I hope I've never presented the financial reason for doing this as the reason to do it. I really feel like the reason to make this step is that you just tell a more complete story. I mean, fundamentally, you, instead of taking someone's picture, you're giving them a voice in their own story. And I think from a storytelling perspective, it's a more robust way of reporting. It's more, you know, honest to your subject. It engages them in the process. It gives them a narrative in their own story. And it's just, to me, a more complete, compelling way to spend your time reporting. Yes, it does have financial implications, both in the reporting process and certainly in post, right? Because, you know, if you shoot 8 hours of still photography, I can edit that in about 20 minutes. If you shoot 8 hours of video, that's about 80 hours in post for me. You know, like linear media just takes a lot more time to edit. So it has a huge cost associated with taking this approach, you know, from a time perspective. From having the gear, from learning all the skills that you need to learn to get good at this. I think the payoff is, you know, potentially the financial payoff is greater, of course, because now you're able to license or distribute into the broadcast format. You have a richer product for the web. You can still do all the print elements that you were doing before, you know, books, exhibits, all that stuff. So in my mind, it's sort of about doing, you know, fewer projects, but doing them in a much more robust, compelling way, and trying to become, you know, relevant with the in-depth storytelling, as opposed to doing quick hit, surface, one media type. You know, it's almost like that's noise. If someone doesn't post your work on Facebook or tweet it, like, it doesn't matter in this day and age, you know. And so how do you break through that? I think you break through it with really compelling storytelling. So it all fits together in my mind. In terms of, you know, the economics, I mean, you know, we're 8 years old as a company. We've grown and we've been able to make enough money to stay in business. You know, we're not making piles of money. We're not trying to make piles of money. That, you know, if that's your goal, then don't choose journalism. Like, that's a really tough field to make a lot of money in. I always tell people, like, you know, that you'll lead a rich life. You're not going to get rich, but you'll have these rich experiences. And if financial return is your goal, then, like, really, please, like, don't get into this field. It's not what it's about. You know, that's not the goal of anyone who operates at a very high level, I think, in this industry.
On your workshops, you kind of emphasize teamwork a lot, and this is something that may be new to photojournalists who are, particularly on long-term projects, are used to working by themselves. How important do you think that is for photojournalists who are going to work in this medium to start thinking about teaming up and working across, you know, two or three people maybe, than trying to do everything themselves?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and it's one of the real challenges. I mean, we're taught from the start to be lone wolves and fly on the wall and in the background and really independent in our vision, and I think all those things can still remain. I do think there is a place for collaboration, both in reporting and certainly in post and certainly in distribution. You know, in the field, it's very hard for one person to do all these things. Like, you know, you can't do them both at the same time. You can't shoot video and take stills at the same time. It's not possible. It's a different way of thinking, a different way of working. So what we found is, you know, when I send someone to cover something, I'm usually sending two people. You know, we're going into a lot of dangerous situations, so I like to have two people just for safety reasons. And then we're also sending people for long periods of time. You know, you get lonely out there, like having a sounding board is valuable. And then for interviews, I mean, it's impossible to conduct an interview by yourself because someone needs to run camera and someone needs to do the interview. So we think a two-person team in the field is really valuable for a variety of reasons. And then once you get to post, I mean, you can spend 10, 15 days covering a subject and then you sit down to try to edit that. You're too close to it, you know. You know everything about that scene, and I think the value of working with someone else who wasn't there, like I never go meet the subjects. Like, you know, I don't want to walk into the room and see the wallpaper and smell it and know everything about it because I'm already forming my idea of what's there. You know, as a producer who wasn't in the situation, all I have is the material that's in front of me. And, you know, someone will come back and say, this is what I think the story is about. And you say, okay, that's neat, but you don't have that. You have this. This is what's really interesting about what you have from someone who's got a completely fresh perspective on what's there. So I think that separation remains really important. And then you get into things like, I don't know, take motion graphics. I mean, you know, asking a still photographer to learn how to do motion graphics, I mean, that's a lot. Asking them to do sound, that's a lot. Like, how many of these new skills can you become excellent at? You know, asking someone to learn how to market and distribute and monetize and, you know, manage contracts. I mean, it's just, we're up against a lot of things, you know. And I think teamwork is, you know, finding people who are like-minded, who share similar passions, but who have complementary skills to you. You know, like if you're really good at shooting, maybe you want someone who's a terrific interview person who can be there with you. If you're a great still photographer, maybe you want to collaborate with a documentary filmmaker to bring that video to the table. Although I still think still photographers should learn that skill because I think it's an obvious progression for us. Yeah, it's hard to do everything by yourself.
So we just have one last question. We like to ask at the end of these discussions for one tip. And this week we're looking at storytelling. Is there one thing that you would put above all else for photojournalists thinking about creating a news story?
Yeah, very simple. It's what I've been saying to every photographer I've ever met, you know, in the last 20 years. I say the same thing to them. Don't just take someone's picture. Give them a voice in their own story. You know, interview someone. If you interview the person that you're documenting, they will tell you what the pictures are that you need to go make. They will actually write the script for you. If you ask them a few good questions and you just listen, truly listen to what they're saying, they're going to tell you things you would have never thought about, you know, because they know their story really, really well. And I think instead of taking, we can give in this process. And that's a beautiful way to tell a story.
Brian Storm, thank you very much for your time. This has been really, truly enlightening.
Of course.